Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 14th of June of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And of course, the most important update we received during the previous 24 hours is the peace proposal by the President of Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. The President of Russia, during a speech at a meeting with the senior staff of the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs, announced the conditions for starting negotiations with Ukraine. The first paragraph is: the armed forces of Ukraine must be completely withdrawn from the territory of DPR and LPR, as well as the Kherson and Zaporozhye regions. Another important statement, that when Putin was talking about this condition, he was talking not about the territory that is already under Russian control, but about the territory that, according to, let's say, Ukraine of configuration of 1991, used to be the entire region. So not just the territory that is already under Russian control, but Putin was talking about the territories that is also under Ukrainian control. Another important, the second, let's say, condition, Kiev's obligation not to join NATO bloc. When talking about this part, I would like to point your attention that there is no obligations to Kiev not to join European Union. So as you can see, Putin is not against joining of European Union, and it's like from the first side. And on the other hand, we see that this way Putin tried to show that he's completely against the organizations made by the United States of America, and he's very okay and very good with the organizations that were made by the European Union and the European countries as well. So these are the most important, let's say, paragraphs, important conditions for starting negotiation process. But let's discuss these paragraphs in details, and more precisely about the first part, about the withdrawal from the territory of different regions. So what kind of regions Putin was talking about, and the territories as well. So let's return back to Ukraine. We have added these regions on map, and as for Kherson direction, this is the territory. As you can see, it's blinking on map with black color. This is the territory that, according to Putin, the Ukrainians should abandon, let's say, in Kherson direction. So this is the rest part of Kherson area that is already under complete Ukraine control. This is, as you can see, very big territory. First of all, it's the first thing. The second thing, this territory includes the town, the city of Kherson, the capital of this region. This territory includes also a very big part of Dnipro River that located, let's say, that's connected with the Black Sea. This is the most important part, because using this part, the Russians would be able to control everything from Kiev to the south of, let's say, the Black Sea. Furthermore, by taking under control this part, if Ukrainians, let's say, accept the Russian, let's say, terms, the Russians will be able to get the access to Ukrainian side of Dnipro River. And if somehow, somewhere in the, let's say, in 10 years, the special military operation will repeat and the war between Russia and Ukraine will start again, the Russians will have already access to the Ukrainian side of Dnipro River, and they will not have to build bridges, pontoon bridges, or find a solution how to cross Dnipro River. They will be already on this side. There are going to be, of course, a lot of military bases, objects, and it will be much more faster for the Russians to move, let's say, in direction of Nikolaev or Odessa. So we've finished with Kherson direction. The next area is Zaporozhye region. According to Putin plans, the Zaporozhye area of configuration of 1991 should be also abandoned by the Ukrainians, and we are talking about this territory. This territory is blinking in front of your screens with the black color. As you can see, this is the Zaporozhye area that Ukrainians should abandon. As you can see, a lot of territories, and the most important, few important things that you need to understand about this territory. First of all, is the town by the name of Zaporozhye, a very big town with the population with over more than 1 million people, with lots of, let's say, industrial zones, lots of energy facilities, power plants, and also with the access to Dnipro River, and also with the foothold on the Ukrainian side of Dnipro River. This is the first important thing. And the second important thing is that the Russians, in comparison with Kherson direction, haven't controlled even a single square kilometer of this part of Zaporozhye area since the beginning of the special military operation. For example, when talking about Kherson, the Russians were everywhere. At the first days of attack, the main Russian positions were also in Arkhangelsk, Vysokopolye. The Russians were controlling Novodmitrievka. So all these territories used to be under Russian control in 2022. But later, after the beginning of Ukraine counterattacks, the Russians were forced to abandon. So basically, by this peace proposal, Putin wants, let's say, restore control over the territories that used to be or was already captured by the Russians in 2022. But as for Zaporozhye, the Russians haven't been controlling even a single square kilometers in these territories since the beginning of the special military operation. And in this case, the Ukrainian authorities can become traitors to people who are living here because they will be forced basically to drop them, to abandon them, and to let's say give them the way to live as a part of Russian Federation. Now we are moving further. We are going to talk about Donetsk. So this is Donetsk, the biggest territory that, according to peace plan of Putin, the Ukrainians should abandon. This area is right in front of your screen, is blinking with black color. Significant territory, lots of towns: Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, Kurachovo, Velikaya Novoselovka, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, Liman, Konstantinovka, Chasiv Yar, Toretsk, Dzержинsk. Lots of towns, lots of settlements, most fortified area by the Ukrainians. As for this territory, some towns of this territory used to be under Russian control in 2014. For example, when this situation started in 2014, Slavyansk, Kramatorsk used to be under Russian control, but then they were forced to fall back. And also, this territory is a part of Russian original plan of the special military operation to restore control over the territory of Donetsk People's Republic of the configuration of Ukraine of 1991. And the last region is Lugansk People Republic, but when talking about this territory, there is just few square kilometers left to capture, that should be captured by the Russians to restore complete control over this region. So just a small area, as you can see. And telling the truth, if negotiations, let's say, starts, let's say, in 3-4 months, this territory most likely would be captured by the Russians by this moment, because now the Russians are storming Stelmakhovka. We are talking about this town every single day. There are very heavy clashes in Novoyegorovka, and in these villages, the Russians already entered these villages few months ago, but then they were forced to abandon their positions on the Ukraine counterattacks. Makiivka, Nevska, all villages along, let's say, Zhiribes area. So all these territories probably will be captured by the Russians even before the beginning of possible negotiations between Russia and the Western countries. So 4 regions, 4 completely different stories and pictures. But of course, this is not enough. Currently, we were talking just about the square kilometers, about the territories, about the towns, and many other things. But the most important thing that I would like to discuss with you is the value of each single region that the Russians are forcing the Ukrainians to abandon, and what is the value of these regions when talking about entire Ukraine. And just a few days ago, Lindsey Graham, the politician of United States of America, made his own analysis about Ukraine. About basically, he was trying to calculate the cost of Ukraine. How much does it cost? How much does this state cost in dollars, of course? And according to him, Ukraine costs currently around $10 trillions, and we are talking about water resources, wood resources, different minerals, iron, coal, gas, oil, everything that we have on the territory of Ukraine. If we summarize everything, the cost is around $10 trillions, right? So, and according to some Russian sources, they managed to, let's say, split the cost among different regions of Ukraine, trying to understand how much does every single region cost in this total cost of 10 trillions. And the Russians are saying that the total cost of Ukraine is around $15 trillions. So, for example, when talking, let's say, about Chernigov area, this is the most northern part of Ukraine, this one, the total cost of this region, this one, is around 25 billions. Just imagine yourself, 25 billions. from the total cost of 15 trillions. So it's even maybe less than percent, as I understand, right? So very small amount, very small cost, okay? Sumy area, according to the same resources map, the cost of Sumy is around 62 billions. So also nothing in comparison with total cost. We have also, let's say, the most west northern regions of Ukraine, and this is, let's say, Rovna area and Zhytomyr area. The total cost, let's say, of northwestern part of Ukraine is 43 and 46 billions for two regions in this area. But there are lots of regions that cost very much, very much. For example, Lvov, according to this classification, cost around Lvov area 521 billions. 521 billions. It's already 200 times more than, let's say, not 20 times more than, let's say, a Chernigov area. For example, Zhytomyr area, Zhytomyr region, this is, for example, Zhytomyr, that located to the west of Kiev, this is it, cost around 555 billions. Also significant, let's say, difference with Kiev itself. Kiev region cost, according to that specific calculation, just 21 billion. So we see that one, let's say, region varies in its costs to each other. But the question is, how much does the most important regions cost? And we are talking about the territories that Ukrainians should, let's say, abandon or withdraw as a result of negotiations with Russia. And we are talking about Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye and Kherson directions. And according to the same classification, for example, Lugansk People Republic, total Lugansk People Republic that is already on complete Russian control, almost cost 3.2 trillions of dollars. Just compare the cost of Lugansk with the cost of Chernigov. 3.2 trillions in comparison with 25 billions. Donetsk People Republic, Donetsk region, if the Russian, this area with this blinking territory, this is it, this territory, let's cost 3.8 trillions dollars. And for example, Zaporozhye, this area where Robotyne battle, the town Zaporozhye itself, $600 billion. So Kherson and the Crimea together cost 200 and, let's say, 20 billion. So not so much in comparison with Zaporozhye, Donetsk and Lugansk. According to Putin's plan, the Ukrainians will receive just one very highly cost region, and we're talking about Dnipro. According to the same classification, the same map, Dnipro cost around 3.5 trillion. So this is the only region that will left to Ukraine according to the Putin's plan. And if we summarize the cost, once again, the total cost of Ukraine is around 15 trillions. And if we split the territories that Russia are planning to take to itself, and of course, first of all, to get legal approval and legal, let's say, legalization, so everybody will recognize this territory as the territory under Russian control, the total cost of these Russian regions would be more than 7 trillions, and Ukrainians will also have just 7 trillions. So to summarize everything, Russia wants to take 20% of Ukraine, more or less, and to get more than 50% of its resources. Ukraine will have 80%, but less than 50% of resources on its cost. And most likely, in this case, Western countries will not continue support to Ukraine, because in this case, Ukraine will not cost to Western countries anything, because the most important, let's say, values, the most important assets are located in Donetsk, Lugansk and Zaporozhye regions. So this is about Putin's plan. And now we understand that most likely either Ukrainians and Western countries will refuse the plan. We start receiving, for example, first updates. For example, Jens Stoltenberg reported that NATO rejected Vladimir Putin's peace plan. The alliance will continue military supplies to Ukraine. We still haven't received, maybe during the watching the video, you will receive some answer from Zelensky as the president of Ukraine. But when I was making the video, there was still no report from him. But some authorities from Ukraine also have already rejected Putin's plan. And we have already discussed a few things about the situation. And now the next and the most important thing that the Russians were trying to achieve by this, let's say, peace proposal that Putin, let's say, published today, is that tomorrow is the beginning of the peace summit in Switzerland, where more than 100 countries all over the world were planning to discuss with Zelensky the peace plan, the peace ultimatum that Zelensky was trying to next to show to the Russians. And during the next few days, more than 100 countries all over the world, including the most powerful countries like United States of America, United Kingdom, France, Germany, and many other countries, were planning to talk about one topic, about the peace. About the peace. Yes, it should be Ukrainian peace, but they were planning to talk about peace. And now we see, because Putin, let's say, provided his own plan of peace agreement with Ukraine, now we understand that tomorrow most of the Western countries will talk just about one thing. During the Peace Day in Switzerland, they will talk about war with Russia till the final Ukrainian. Obviously, this is going to be like this. So that was another joke from Putin, where he was showing that obviously we're planning at the beginning to talk about war, not about any peace in any conditions. Now let's move to the situation on the ground. We have very important updates. Let's hide the Putin peace agreement plan from the map, and let's continue with the situation on the ground. The most important updates are coming from the South Donetsk direction, and we got the final confirmation that the Russians established complete control over the village by the name of Heorhiivka. This territory was captured by the Russians. During the previous days, we got 3 or 4 days in a row we've been receiving updates that the Russians captured, but without any geolocated confirmations. And today, on this 14th of June, we've got finally the confirmation. The video was published by the 46th Air Mobile Brigade of how the Ukrainians were FPV droning and attacking the Russian offensive forces who were storming Heorhiivka itself and who managed to reach the eastern outskirts of Maximilianovka. To summarize everything, the Russians captured not just Heorhiivka, but the, let's say, the most western geolocation was spotted in the eastern building, among the eastern buildings and streets of Heorhiivka itself. So the battle for Heorhiivka has started. Significant progress, as you can see, and the Russians, of course, will continue moving further. And most likely, the video was published first of all by the 46th Air Mobile Brigade, so by the Ukrainian sources. So we shouldn't expect, let's say, videos with significant Russian progress from those videos. So most likely the Russians managed to move even further to the west, and maybe the battle already is taking place in the central part of the town. So anyway, this is the last town before Kurakhova, the heart of the South Donetsk direction, and the Russians are very close to this territory. Now we are moving to Krasnogorovka. We got also significant number of updates, and according to information we have, the Russians continue offensive operation in this area, and now the Russians captured additional, let's say, block in the central part. We have the video that was published by the Russian sources. In this video we can see another attempt to attack the town, significant number of armored vehicles and Russian forces and troopers. For example, on this episode we can see how the Russian infantry and the Russian soldiers, stormtroopers, were trying to capture another building in the central part. The building was geolocated in the city, and we have adjusted the map based on that. So the Russian infantry was operating in this area, which confirms complete control over this territory. Furthermore, we have additional update from the northern part. According to more or less reliable mappers, pro-Russian mappers, the Russians, as a result of offensive, also established complete control over this territory. And now we can see, to summarizing everything we just discussed, we see that the situation for the Ukrainians inside of the citadel is becoming vital and critical. Either they need to start withdrawing process, or they will be encircled by the Russians from the, let's say, west and from the, let's say, northeast. So now we see that something like this is taking place. And of course, the Ukrainians will not allow this. They will try not to allow this, to avoid this, but the only way how to avoid this is to start running away from their positions. Now we are moving further to Nivolska. Today, according to information we have, the Russians captured completely the village. This information was reported from not reliable resource, so we are waiting for additional updates before changing the color of the map. Very interesting details are coming from the western Avdiivka area. We have adjusted the map, as you can see. There are few, let's say, areas. Let's discuss them. We still haven't received any geolocations confirming the additional Russian progress on the northern part of Balki-Babaki. This update was posted by Deep State Map, and after that nobody confirmed this progress of the armed forces of Russian Federation. To the east of Novoselovka-Persha, there are few areas. First of all, we're going to talk about these fields. Today the Ukrainian sources published the video of another Russian attack with significant number of armored vehicles vehicles, tanks, personnel carriers that were heading towards Novosylovka-Pershe. As a result of that attack, some Russian armored vehicles were damaged and destroyed, but the Russians, of course, managed to improve their positions, and we have colored this territory under complete Russian control. So the Russians were attacking from the east to the west, something like this. And as a result of attack, they captured these territories. Also, we see that the Russians are pushing from Novopokrovska to Novosylovka-Pershe from the northeast. We have report from Deep State that this territory was captured, but for now without any geolocations confirming this. Anyway, summarizing everything, the battle for Novosylovka-Pershe has started because the Russians reached the outskirts and the first buildings, and now they can see the first buildings right in front of their eyes. The most important updates are coming from Novoalexandrovka. We have adjusted the map, we have additional progress and updates from the Russian side. There are 3 territories, as you can see. The southern part, this one, the control over this territory was provided by pro-Ukrainian mappers, but yet we haven't received geolocations confirming that the Russians captured these 3 lands and this stronghold. The same story is about the stronghold between Novoalexandrovka and Kalinova. According to pro-Ukrainian mappers and pro-Russian mappers, this territory was captured, but yet without any geolocations confirming this. And today we got the final confirmation that the Russians did capture around 80% of Novoalexandrovka. We have the video of how the Ukrainians were conducting reconnaissance operation. In this video we can see the Ukrainian drone was flying during the daylight above Novoalexandrovka, trying to discover the Russian positions, probably to coordinate artillery or mortar systems or FPV drones, and the Ukrainians were flying very long, and at some point, somewhere in the end of the video, we can see that they managed to spot Russian soldier who was moving from one building to another. Probably later the Ukrainians provided to, let's say, artillery forces the coordinates, and the Ukrainians destroyed the building, but the most important is that the Russian soldier was moving along the street, which confirms complete Russian control, at least over this territory, which automatically means that the Russians were controlling everything to the east. We have adjusted the map showing the additional Russian progress. We still haven't received anything about this territory, but according to some pro-Russian sources, this territory also was captured by the Russians. So let's wait a little bit more. Now we are moving further to Chasiv Yar. During the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything from this direction, no progress, no movements. Very interesting details we continue receiving from Razdolovka. The Russians continue offensive, they continue publishing the photos and videos of how they were storming the last strongholds of the armored forces of Ukraine in the village itself. There are very heavy clashes inside of this territory. Most likely the village will fall within the next few days, and the Russians will begin storming the Siversk itself. According to different mappers, the Ukrainians confirmed the Russian progress in this area, that these fields were captured by the Russians. As of these, let's say, fields, they are, according to most of the mappers, are in the gray zone. Nobody knows what exactly is happening exactly here. Let's move the 21st Special Purpose Battalion further to the north. We haven't received anything from the northern part, just regular activity about the Russian attempts to capture Verkhnyikamyansk. Now the Russians, after they captured the stronghold to the east, start clearing the area with FPV drones, which confirms about further Russian plans to move further to the west with the purpose to capture the village completely and to begin storm of Siversk itself. As for Kupiansk direction, after a very long, let's say, Russian series of attacks in the northern part, in the central and in the southern part, we haven't received anything, almost anything from this direction, which confirms that probably after the Russians managed to achieve some results, they decided to make a small operational pause until they restore, recover, and maybe after a short operational pause, they will renew their offensive further to the west. We got very interesting details about Kharkiv direction, more precisely about the situation in the northern part of Kupiansk. We got a very interesting updates that I would like to share with you. As you have mentioned, there is a very interesting situation with mappers, including Deep State, who shows that most of the Vovchansk aggregatny plant, this one territory is, let's say, for 60-70% is under complete Russian control, just maybe 20 or 30 left under the Ukraine control. But for some reason, the territory between, let's say, Russian mainland and this industrial zone, according to Deep State, was colored as a gray zone. And we had a lot of questions, why is that, how is it possible? So today we got significant number of details from Ukrainian sources, pro-Ukrainian sources, and pro-Russian sources, and now I understand the entire picture of this situation. Let's discuss this in details. First of all, it was correct and completely right reports that the Russians managed to enter Vovchansk industrial zone, and that the Russians were storming this territory, probably have been storming this territory probably for the previous week or even more. There are very heavy clashes, the Russians are moving further, and now the Russians control maybe 60 or 70% of this territory. And by the time the Russians captured, let's say, the major part of this industrial zone, the critical situation started developing for the Ukrainians who were located in the citadel. And according to information we have, the citadel was and is under the responsibilities of the 71st Jaeger Brigade. And they were blocked basically in the citadel. And of course, the Ukrainians, when they become blocked as a result of Russian offensive in the south, start thinking what to do next. First of all, the first thing that came to their mind, how to break through the encirclement and how to evacuate the soldiers that were located there. And by this morning, we got a very important update from pro-Russian sources, more precisely from the, let's say, Group of Forces North's official Telegram channel. They reported that during the previous night, the Ukrainians made significant number of attempts to counterattack Russian positions in the south and in the southwestern and the southern, let's say, directions. So the Ukrainians made significant number of attacks in this direction by the forces of 71st Jaeger Brigade with the purpose to break through the encirclement and to abandon the northern Vovchansk. This is the version of the Russian sources. But when talking about the Ukrainians, they are saying completely different situation. Once again, the Ukrainians made, according to the Russians, 3 waves of attacks. Each wave included around 90 soldiers. Most of those attacks were repelled by the Russians. The Ukrainians suffered significant losses, around 50 soldiers. This is Ukrainian version. But the Ukrainians are saying completely different story. According to the Ukrainians, the Russians did manage to capture this gray zone, the Russians managed to capture this gray zone, and the Russians entered Vovchansk aggregatny plant and established control for over more than 60 or 70%. And when the Russians, let's say, were involved deep inside the industrial zone, the Ukrainians conducted a counterattack from the high-rise building from the citadel, and basically the Ukrainians managed to capture this territory and to encircle the Russians who were blocked in the industrial zone. So something like this the Ukrainians created. So that was a cauldron, and according to Ukrainians, the Russians were blocked inside of industrial zone. So we don't know for sure the exact number of Russians there, but according to the Ukrainians, it's a cauldron for Russians. So now we see completely two different reports. The Russians are saying that they created a cauldron for the Ukrainians in the citadel. The Ukrainians made a lot of attempts to counterattack with the breakthrough purpose, but those attacks were repelled and the Ukrainians continue staying in the citadel. The Ukrainians are saying completely different story. The Russians captured industrial zone and the Ukrainians counterattacked and created the cauldron for the Russians. Who to believe, it's up to you. But sooner or later we will understand the real, let's say, situation, because it's impossible to control now two territories. Either the Russians would be defeated, would be boiled, let's say, in this area, either the Ukrainians would be destroyed in the citadel. And who will be destroyed? The first will be the lost side, and who will stay will be the victory side. So, but this is the situation in Vovchansk. Two cauldrons, two semi-cauldrons. The Russians created cauldron for Ukrainians, Ukrainians created cauldron for the Russians. And now nobody can abandon their positions, and now the entire situation will be resolved as a result of counterattacks on the flanks. Who win the flanks battle will win the battle for the northern Vovchansk. As for Lipsy, nothing important, just regular activity. The only important update is that the relatives of the 42nd Mechanized Brigade start searching for their fathers, brothers and sons in the battle for Gluboka, because according to information we have, the 3rd Battalion of 42nd Brigade was completely erased from the story, from the history of Ukrainian Special Military Operation, because the brigade battalion was completely destroyed by the Russians as a result of attacks on Gluboka. And now the relatives are trying to search and to find their lost, let's say, relatives among the fields. Of course, they're not there. They're just trying to post messages, trying to ask anybody to help them, and that's it. And that's it for today. Military Summary Channel reminds you to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.